We can go to Mr. Kimmich for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So very quickly to the IRCC official specifically on housing, because you mentioned it in your opener. It's mentioned 36 times in the immigration levels plan. Is your branch the one that wrote the warning that was talked about in the Canadian press that internal reports warned Minister Fraser when he was immigration minister that the high levels of immigration levels to Canada were going to cause a housing crunch?
As I mentioned earlier, the housing supply gap has many factors, and it would be unfair to say that it is caused by international students.
No, sorry, Chair. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm asking about. I did raise my hand, Chair. I asked specifically about an internal report that journalists have spoken about and written about in the Canadian press, the National Post, and other media outlets from January 2024, referring to material written in 2022, so 2 years ago, saying that there was going to be a housing crunch and making the connections directly to the immigration levels to Canada. That's not me saying it. That's an internal IRCC report. So I'm asking, is your branch or either of you two the ones that wrote this report?
I joined the department about 18 months ago. I can't speak to anything prior to that. What I can say is over the last 18 months, we have been having continuous conversations. Information has been sought and received by the minister about challenges in the international student program, and that is what has led to the reforms that I summarized.
So I'm going to interrupt you there. So I want that internal report because journalists have access to it. And I would like it tabled with this committee in an unredacted format because that is directly what's led to changes in the international student program. Everybody has made that connection. I think all members, especially on the opposition side, are deserving to know what the minister was warned about before he was shuffled out of his portfolio because he had failed and a new minister was put in. So can you make that commitment to file that with this committee? Journalists already have it. This committee doesn't have it.
I don't believe I have that report, so I would need to revert to the department and return to the committee with a response.
Can we consider that a commitment to provide us with the report?
Ms. May, you want to respond?
Oh, I had responded.
Okay, Chair. I'm going to move on but on housing. Housing starts are now down an extra 15% from last year. When the department was preparing the immigration levels plan, how much did they look at international students specifically as a source of reductions for the total numbers in order to avoid the pressures that the department warned the ministers 2 years ago on? What percentage did you consider on it were related to the housing crunch, related to international study program?
So I'm here today in my capacity as the Director General for the International Students Program. The levels plan is led out of another area of the department, so they would be able to provide you more details on what pieces of information.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I would agree with you, but this levels plan has temporary resident numbers now, so it includes your sides as well, and that's the first time it's in there, so it includes your branch of your department is now included in the levels plan. That's why I'm asking what total percentage was considered and directly related to housing.
So as you've just mentioned, this levels plan is the first time that temporary resident volumes have been reflected. And international students do make up the largest share of temporary resident volume. In January of this year, a decision was made on international students to set the level at based on a zero net growth model. So what that meant was that the amount of new study permits that would be approved could not exceed the number of permits that were expiring in this year. And as a result of the government's commitment to reduce temporary resident volumes to 5% of the total population, a decision was taken that for 2025, that cap for students would need to be reduced by a further 10%, and for that number to be held constant in 2026.
Mr. Kimmich for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My first questions will be to Dr. Gatfield. I have a quote here from Universities Canada CEO. He says, Canada's international reputation has taken a huge hit. Would you agree with your colleague at Universities Canada?
The headlines around the world emphasize and raise concern about Canada having changed its historic welcoming of the best and brightest. And then from our perspective, that's a concern that we certainly share.
Okay. In order to, convince Canadians that the research universities are doing their part, I'm going to ask you a few very specific questions about the institutions that make up your organization. How much camping housing do they provide in total?
In recruiting international students at the graduate level in particular, but also at the undergraduate level, it is essential to think about it in terms of a systematic approach. It's not just getting an admission, but what are the supports? What is the question of housing? What is the question of other services that will help that student? And in fact, we know, for example, even in the case of the University of Toronto, guaranteed first-year housing. In the case of the University of Toronto, it varies across our institution, but in no case is there this has been a problem.
Dr. Gatfield, I'm asking specifically about campus housing, whether it's international students or domestic. That's not my question. It's just total housing, dorm space at these research universities. Do you have a number?
We know that it is adequate for the demand.
Okay. And can you provide the number with the committee?
We don't collect that information at our association.
So how do you know that it's meeting the demand?
Because we've just had a meeting of our executive heads, and it's clear that they reported that it is.
So verbally they reported to you, and you're reporting it here. How much do U15s then spend? How much do U15s spend on housing as a percentage of your total budgets?
We don't collect that information, but it's readily available. That's all public information.
So how would you know that it's sufficient?
We could help your staff provide that in terms of their ability to recruit.
But provide it to the committee, please, so that we can better understand. Then I was going to go back to the question of reputational harm. When the government announced its early changes, were you consulted?
No.
On the grad cap that was introduced in September, were you consulted?
No. Well, we fed in early on to say that that was absolutely, for us, unjustified.
Okay, thank you for that.